The station's gravity was wrong. Not measurably wrong. The accelerometers in Ivankov's suit reported 0.97 g, well within nominal, but her vestibular system disagreed with her visual cortex in ways she couldn't name, a low-grade argument conducted entirely below conscious awareness. She'd been aboard Confluence Station for 6 minutes, and her cerebellum was already filing complaints. She checked her duffel strap, moved through the docking corridor, and tried not to catalog the ways the architecture didn't make sense for bipeds. The station belonged to the Vehari. Ivankov knew this the way she knew her own blood type, abstractly, from documents, without having processed what it meant until the corridor opened into the atrium, and she saw one standing 12 meters away, motionless, apparently watching her arrive. The first thing her visual system assembled, bilateral symmetry, yes, but rotated 90 degrees from expectation. The Vehari's major axis was horizontal. 4 limbs touched the floor, distributed like load-bearing columns, and a fifth structure rose from the central body mass, not quite a neck, not quite a tail, ending in a cluster of sensory organs that were currently oriented toward Ivankov with the precision of a dish antenna. The second thing, it was wrapped in something. A garment, perhaps, or a biological integument. Her eyes couldn't resolve the boundary. The material moved like aurora, like oil on water, like the specific category of beautiful that the human nervous system had never needed to name because it had never encountered it before. She stopped walking. Her amygdala sent a signal. She overrode it on the grounds that she was a xenocontact specialist and this was her job. Specialist Ivankov. The voice came from her translator implant, not from the Vehari. It was processing the electromagnetic modulations the creature emitted and rendering them into approximated Mandarin, which her implant then converted to Russian. 2 layers of lossy compression. Your transit was satisfactory. Within parameters, Ivankov said. The Vehari's sensory cluster rotated slightly, adjusted. The garment, she was thinking of it as a garment now, she'd committed, rippled in response to some output from the creature's body. Bioluminescent, possibly, or piezoelectric, or neither. The xenobiology briefings had used the word integumentary 17 times without once explaining what the integument actually did. We were uncertain, the Vehari said, whether humans experienced transit as distressing. Our models suggested 63% probability of physiological stress markers. Your models were right, Ivankov said. I'm stressed, I'm also here. Another rotation of the sensory cluster. A new ripple through the luminous veil. Ivankov's pattern recognition systems, the ones that had been reading faces since she was 4 months old, tried to parse the motion as expression and failed completely. You acknowledge the stress, the Vehari said. It would be inaccurate not to. Our previous human contacts did not acknowledge stress. They presented normalized affect. That's called lying, Ivankov said, or politeness. The distinction is mostly cultural. The sensory cluster held its orientation for 4.3 seconds. Ivankov counted because she had nothing else to do with the part of her brain that wanted to run. You are assigned to the observation chamber, the Vehari said finally. I will guide you. My designation in your interface is rendered as Serevahl. Ivankov, she said. We know. She followed Serevahl through corridors that curved in directions she associated with nausea and arrived at a hexagonal room with one transparent wall looking out at. She checked her implant's navigation overlay, not space. An interior. Some vast hollow at the station's core, filled with structures she had no names for. You are the first human assigned to long-duration contact, Serevahl said. 30 of your days. I know. Are you afraid? Ivankov looked at the structures in the hollow. They moved slowly, rearranging themselves with the patience of geological processes. Something about the motion was almost familiar. Almost. Yes, she said. We did not expect that answer. I know, she said again. She put down her duffel and started unpacking, because whatever happened next, she was going to need somewhere to put her things. By the fourth day, Ivankov had developed a theory about the veil. It wasn't clothing. It wasn't quite biology. It occupied the space between those categories the way some organisms occupied the space between animal and plant, not a failure of classification, but an indictment of the classifier. The veil responded to Serevahl's internal state. That much seemed clear. When they were processing something complex, it dimmed to near transparency. When they were in what Ivankov had tentatively labeled a communicative state, it brightened and moved in patterns she'd begun logging. She logged everything. It was the only thing keeping her functional. You observe the integument, Serevahl said on the morning of day 5. Not a question. I observe everything, Ivankov said. It's my job. What does the integument communicate to you? She considered lying, decided against it. Mostly I don't know. Sometimes I think I see patterns. Then I think I'm doing what humans always do, which is seeing patterns where there aren't any. There are patterns, Serevahl said. What do they mean? The veil shifted through 3 distinct configurations in rapid succession. They mean what I am, not what I feel. The distinction is important. Ivankov set down her recording tablet. Explain that. Your species has a concept of emotional concealment. You experience an internal state and present a different external state. We observe this capacity in all humans we have contacted. It is a pause that her implant flagged as linguistically significant, perplexing. We call it privacy, Ivankov said, or strategy or survival. It is inefficient. Most human things are. Serevahl's sensory cluster oriented toward the transparent wall, toward the structures moving in the hollow. The integument cannot conceal. It responds to my processing state. It is always accurate. That sounds exhausting. It sounds, another flagged pause. What does exhausting mean in this context? Ivankov thought about it. Like a cost you're always paying, whether you want to or not. Then no, Serevahl said. It does not sound exhausting. It sounds like baseline function. On day 7, something went wrong in the hollow. Ivankov didn't see it begin. She was eating, which required a degree of attention she resented but could not avoid. But her implant registered a shift in the station's electromagnetic output, and her vestibular system resumed its argument with her visual cortex at increased volume. She went to the transparent wall. In the hollow, 3 of the slow-moving structures had stopped. A 4th was moving too fast, oscillating between positions, its motion carrying the specific quality of error. Serevahl was already at the wall beside her. The veil had gone dark. What's happening? Ivankov asked. A processing failure in subsection Veth. The reconfiguration algorithm is caught in a loop. A pause. It will damage structural integrity in approximately 4 minutes if uncorrected. What's the correction? Manual intervention. A Vehari must enter the hollow and physically interrupt the oscillation cycle. Okay, Ivankov said. How? They must apply pressure to the primary node at the moment the structure reaches its maximum displacement. The timing window is 0.3 seconds. Ivankov watched the oscillating structure. It moved with machine regularity, maximum displacement, minimum, maximum, a metronome made of something that weighed, she estimated, several hundred tons. Where's the primary node? Specialist Ivankov. Where is it? Serevahl's veil did something she hadn't seen it do before. Every pattern she'd logged in 5 days appeared simultaneously, overlapping, interfering with each other, a confusion of light that her primate visual system tried to read as emotion and produced only noise. You cannot. She was already moving. Her implant had the station layout. The access point to the hollow was 40 meters away. She ran, which was inefficient and also the only thing that made sense. The hollow was cold in the way deep space was cold, not temperature exactly but absence, a vacuum of the expected. The oscillating structure was larger up close, its motion displacing air and rhythmic compression she felt in her chest before she heard anything. She found the primary node by the heat signature her implant highlighted, a junction point where several structural elements converged, currently traveling its arc at roughly 8 meters per second. She had 0.3 seconds. The part of her that had survived on the basis of conscious deliberation said, "This is stupid." The part that was older than language said, "Jump." She jumped. Her palms hit the node at maximum displacement. The impact registered in her wrists, her shoulders, her spine in that exact order, each transmission traveling up bone at the speed of compression waves. The structure shuddered, hesitated, stopped. The hollow was very quiet. Ivankov lay on the floor of the hollow with her hand still pressed against the node and her nervous system conducting a full-body damage assessment. The results were bruised, not broken, functional. That was irrational, Serevahl said. They had followed her. Their veil was doing the thing with all the patterns again. Yes, Ivankov agreed. You could not have calculated the correct timing with your sensory apparatus. I didn't calculate it. Then how? I don't know, Ivankov said honestly. I just knew when. The veil went very still. All the patterns stopped. What remained was something Ivankov had no word for, not darkness, not light, but the space between them held perfectly. On day 12, Serevahl asked her about grief. Not in those words. The Vehari didn't have a word that mapped cleanly to grief. What they had was a concept Ivankov's implant rendered as the processing load of irrecoverable data loss, which was either a beautiful description of grief or proof that no translation could ever be adequate, possibly both. Why does your species retain memories that cause damage? Serevahl asked. They were in the observation chamber. The structures in the hollow were moving again, restored, their slow rearrangements no longer carrying the quality of error. Ivankov had been watching them for an hour without trying to name what she saw. We don't choose to, she said. The memories keep themselves. This is not efficient. No. It impairs function. Sometimes it improves it. Serevahl's sensory cluster oriented toward her with an attention she'd learned to read as genuine, as close to genuine as her pattern recognition systems could get, anyway, operating on a substrate they'd never evolved to parse. Explain how impaired function can be an improvement. Ivankov thought about her brother. She thought about the specific weight of carrying someone who no longer existed, the way it changed the density of certain decisions, made some things matter more and others become irrelevant. She thought about the hollow and jumping, and the moment before she jumped when some part of her that predated language had simply known. Before I came here, she said, my brother died 18 months ago. Station accident not unlike what almost happened in the hollow. She watched Serevahl's veil register the information in patterns she'd cataloged but still couldn't fully read. I know how fast structural failures move. I know the timing not because I calculated it but because I lived through the aftermath of not being fast enough once. That knowledge lives in my body now. It's not stored as data. It doesn't access as data. It just acts. The irrecoverable data loss changed your response architecture, Serevahl said. Yes. This is why you jumped. This is why I could jump. The veil moved through a long, slow configuration she hadn't seen before. New pattern. She added it to her log without knowing what to label it. Our models, Serevahl said slowly, predicted your species' irrationality as a liability. The probability calculations consistently indicated that emotional processing degraded performance in high-stakes situations. Your models aren't wrong, Ivankov said. Most of the time they're right. But not always. The times they're wrong are the times that matter most. Serevahl was quiet for 23 seconds. Ivankov had stopped overriding her amygdala's signals. She'd simply gotten used to them, the way you got used to the wrong gravity, the way her cerebellum had eventually stopped filing complaints and just adjusted. "We have contacted 61 species," Serevahl said. "None of them jump into structural failures, into anything, into unknowns, into situations where the probability of success is below the threshold our models define as rational action." Ivankov looked at the structures moving in the hollow, their slow rearrangements, the patience of them. "What threshold is that?" 51%. Any action with lower estimated probability of success is classified as irrational and filtered from our behavioral options. You can filter your own behavior. We optimize it, yes. She thought about that for a long moment, about what it meant to be a mind that could see its own decision tree and prune it, about what you lost when you pruned it, about what you kept. "What was the probability," she said, "that I'd stop that structure in time?" A pause. "Our models calculated 11%. 11? Yes. And if I hadn't tried?" The probability of significant structural damage was 94%. 3 Vehari would have been in the affected sections. Their probability of survival was, another pause, longer, not high. Ivankov nodded slowly. So a mind that only acts above 51% would have watched 94% happen. The veil went still again, that particular stillness. She'd labeled it in her log as unknown, possibly recalibration. "Yes," Serevahl said, "that is what would have happened." Outside the transparent wall, the structures rearranged themselves with geological patience. Ivankov watched them and thought about all the things the Vehari's models had never predicted. That humans would pack bond with their dead, carry them as functional architecture, act on knowledge that lived in the body rather than the brain. That the irrecoverable data loss would become a form of wisdom that no optimization process could replicate, because optimization required knowing the outcome in advance, and some things could only be learned by failing to prevent them. "Serevahl," she said. "Yes. What does your veil look like right now?" The pause was the longest yet. When Serevahl answered, her implant flagged the response as high-confidence translation, rare for anything the Vehari said. "It looks like the moment before the structures in the hollow began moving again," Serevahl said. "After the failure was corrected, when nothing was broken and nothing was certain and everything was about to begin." Ivankov looked at the veil. She couldn't read the pattern, she didn't try. She looked at it the way she'd looked at her brother's face in the last years, when she'd finally stopped trying to understand him and started simply seeing him. The way her visual cortex assembled the light off the luminous, shifting surface of a being she would never fully know, in a gravity that was still slightly wrong, on a station at the edge of everything familiar. She memorized it anyway. That was the human thing. That was always the human thing. To hold what couldn't be held, carry what couldn't be carried, jump when the numbers said don't. Somewhere in the slow rearrangements of the hollow, something settled into a new configuration. Neither of them said anything. The veil kept moving, patient and unreadable, speaking in a language made of light.